Hi, and welcome to this installment of Elder Law 101, adapted or updated for 2025. If you haven't seen these before, my name is Arthur Bergeron. I'm an elder law attorney. I do nothing but elder law. I'm in a firm called Myrick. It used to be called Myrick O'Connell. We're the largest firm outside of Boston. The main office is in Worcester. We have offices in Westboro, also in Boston. And there's about 80 lawyers, so everybody gets to do what they like, and I like this. I do nothing but elder law, and have done nothing but elder law for about 15 years. So the point of this set of presentations, I had done a number of presentations in senior centers, and realized that I thought it would be helpful for folks if there was one comprehensive set of presentations that would help seniors understand a bunch of issues and how those issues change even during their life. So the episode we're about to do is episode 11, and we're talking about Medicare in this one, but it's all part of the series. We started off with I have a set of characters named Frank and Mary, and their kids Peter, Paul, and Mary Jr. And I always tell people, if you're old enough to get the joke, you're old enough to be my client. And we started off with Frank and Mary under age 60, and we talked about dealing with issues when you're under 60, incapacity issues, making sure you have a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy, dealing with the unlikely possibility that there might be something serious that goes wrong during those years. Then I talked about life in their 60s, when they are retiring or thinking of retiring, and dealing with starting to take withdrawals from their 401k or their IRA, or start getting Social Security, thinking about Medicare, a bunch of issues. Talked about them in their 70s, when they are now, not frail, still active, but kind of thinking about it more, and so trying to figure out some of those issues. And then I actually did because these seminars were originally designed to go January through December. So in the April one, tax season, I talked about those a set of income tax basics specifically for seniors, because there are some issues that you really want to know about if you're a senior, relating to capital gains taxes, regarding taking funds out of your IRA or your 401k. There's a set of issues. Then I dealt with my friends Frank and Mary in their 80s, at which point they really are starting to deal with frailty issues and need to be dealing with protecting things if they need nursing home care, and how do you figure all that out. There's a bunch of issues. I specifically do a seminar on why you can always qualify for Mass Health, which always amazes people. I did one on the last day of your life, which you may be living the last day of your life right now, but it's more likely that you're living it if you're in your 80s or your 90s. But the point is, there are a set of issues specifically related to frailty and dealing with things before you die that I talk about. Then I talk about dealing with the things you left behind after you die, in estate administration and all of those things. I have a seminar specifically about trust, because clients are constantly coming in saying, don't I need a trust? All my friends have a trust, or they already have one, but it may be the wrong one. And so I talk about the different kinds of issues that seniors face, and how the issues change over time, and therefore how the trust may need to change over time. In episode 10, I talked about figuring out issues specifically regarding their kids and their grandkids, assuming that they're now gone. How do they plan ahead to deal with kids who may have some problems, or with their grandchildren? In this episode 11, I'm talking specifically about Medicare, a universal issue among all seniors. And then finally, in the final episode, we'll talk about, it was originally designed to be presented in December, so it's all about 'tis the season. We talk about giving, we talk about plan giving, but we also talk about the kinds of planning that you need to do yourself in terms of dealing with your IRA, your tax deferred funds, other issues that you need to do before the end of the year. Right? So anyway, going back, this is now episode 11. As I mentioned, I always talk about my friends Frank and Mary and their kids, Peter, Paul, and Mary Jr., and their goal in life, which is, especially when you get older, like I'm 75 myself, and I always tell my clients, you get to an age where it's like fame and fortune have passed you by, you just want to get a good night's sleep. So the question is, what is it that may be keeping you up at night? Now, so when we talk about Frank and Mary and their kids, and now back when Frank and Mary were younger, and so were their kids, of course, they had things that would keep them up would be like, what if the house burns down, right? What if there's a car accident? What if one of the kids gets hurt? What if one of us dies suddenly? Those are the issues of younger people, and there are a lot of them, right? The issues change, though, after all of the kids have grown up and Frank and Mary have gotten older. The issues then are, what about the hospital bills? What about the ambulance bill? What about the doctor bill? Physicians, physical therapists, drugs? Because the issue is you're getting older, and as I often tell folks, you get older, and the prospect of death is much less intimidating and much more real, right? But less intimidating. It's like death is death. Your real worry is about frailty, about getting older, about running out of money before you die, right? And about facing a lot of these kinds of expenses that are typically related to health. In the old days, that was a big, big problem for seniors. Today, the answer to all of these questions now is Medicare. In the old days, the answer was poverty. According to, I remember reading this great statistic that in 1960, 33% of all senior households were living in poverty. In 2020, that was 6%. What is the reason? Medicare. In the old days, because you never get health insurance when you were old, and so you'd just get cut off, and you'd have these, of course, at just the time that you really needed the health insurance, right? And so people would just go broke, right? But finally, Medicare was created, and it's changed life completely. People don't remember that those days, because it was 60 years ago, in 1960, when that was such a big problem, right? So to understand Medicare, though, you need to understand a little bit about, Medicare isn't just this one big pile of benefits. There were really kind of four piles. There's Medicare A. Medicare was originally created in the 60s. The big push was from the hospitals, because the hospitals were just getting killed in terms of their cost of providing all of this care to seniors. They wanted a solution here. They wanted an insurance solution. So Medicare A, which was the original piece of Medicare, covers hospitals, hospital stay from admission. There's a deductible at the time that you get admitted, and there's a maximum number of days that you can stay in the hospital and be 100% covered by Medicare. And after the first 20 days, the amount that they're covering is less. It also covers skilled nursing facilities for the first 100 days in the nursing home. It covers medical care if you're home, actually. If you're homebound and can't get out to get care at the hospital or in your doctor's office or whatever, it covers that. And there's also a hospice benefit. If the doctor says that it is likely that given your current condition, you're going to die within the next 100 days, or excuse me, within the next 6 months, then there's a hospice benefit. So that's all Medicare. Medicare B, on the other hand, there's always a deductible, or excuse me, there's always a deductible. Medicare B, which covers doctors and day treatments at the hospital and emergency room if you're not admitted, and labs and durable medical equipment. There's a whole bunch of stuff, right? But there are co-pays, right? And there is a deductible, right? And typically the way that all of that gets calculated is that you inevitably, as a senior, you've gotten these documents from Social Security, or from Medicare rather. Oh yeah, here's the amount that was charged, and this isn't a bill, and here's the amount we're actually going to pay, which is typically that what Medicare does is they calculate not how much the provider would have charged in the private market, but they look at what the ordinary and reasonable cost of that service would have been, and then they take 80% of that number, and that's what they pay to the provider, et cetera, right? Leaving you to actually pay the deductibles and the copays, which is the reason for the evolution of so-called Medicare supplemental plans. I know many people, I tell them this, and they say, well, wait a minute, I never pay that stuff. Well, that's probably because you have the only original plan, I remember when, kind of growing up, the only plan we ever heard about was MedX. MedX was the original Blue Cross Blue Shield supplemental plan, and that's what it covers. It covers those co-pays and deductibles. Maybe not all of them. Typically, there are several, no matter which company does these, and a number of insurance companies do these now, there are these different levels that you can buy, and as you can imagine, the higher the lower the premium, the less you're being covered. Typically the maximum plans for each company will pay all of the co-pays and all of the deductibles, right? And will sometimes pay them kind of into the future. So, for example, if you've got a very long hospital stay, so you've just run out of your Medicare benefit, many of these plans will pay for those additional days, right? And so that's what the supplemental plans are. So, and that was the original Medicare A and B. Then came Medicare D. And you're saying, well, why are we getting to D? Where's C? Well, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But then came Medicare D, enacted during the George W. Bush administration in the early 2000s, which was the thing that seniors had been crying for 60 years since Medicare was created, because they said, that's all well and good, pay the hospital and pay the doctor, but, my big bills are my drug bills. And those drug bills have continued to go up, right? And so can't you figure out somehow to pay these drug bills? And that's what Medicare D was meant to do, right? And many of you folks realize, so Medicare D is not an automatic benefit that is provided by the government. Medicare D plans are all private, are provided by private insurers, and there are a number of them that provide them. And the plans are all over the place. And the way they work is very simple. You pay a premium for your plan. And then when you're buying those drugs, you're probably going to pay a deductible, right? There's going to be some deductible regarding the amount that you owe. And then once you exceed that deductible, there's probably going to be a copay regarding the drug. And there may be drugs that are not covered at all by your plan. And you are responsible for figuring all this out. It's unbelievably complicated. And the plans, actually, like the Medicare plans, right? They change every year. The plans actually change every year. So you may have a plan right now that covers your drug, covers 100% of your drug, right? But as of January 1 next year, that plan may not cover any of it, right? You may not even be in the plan, or the amount that it covers, for a $3,000 drug may change from $3,000 to like $50, right? And so it is your obligation every year to try to figure all of that stuff out, right? And then there's Medicare C, and you've never hear of it called Medicare C. You hear of it called Medicare Advantage. These are plans that are not offered by the federal government, like A and B are, right? They're more like D. They are plans that are offered by private insurance companies. They are required, these plans are required to cover everything that Medicare A and Medicare B cover, but they often will cover more than that. They're allowed to cover more than that, right? So these are the plans that have become more and more popular nationally. About 33% of all seniors nationally are on a Medicare C plan or a Medicare Advantage plan. In Massachusetts, that percentage is only about 20%. It just has not taken off here, right? But the point is, they're private plans. You decide on the premium that you want to pay by deciding, once again, which plan you want to buy, because there are like, silver and bronze and gold, and so you need to figure that out. And each of these plans, while they offer the basic things that are covered by Medicare A and B, they also can offer other things. But for example, eye care, hearing, dental, the cost of staying healthy. Many of these plans will actually have a benefit that will pay for your membership at the health club, for example, right? As well as paying very specific things. But once again, these plans vary all over the map, right? So how do you figure all this out? I mean, so there's good news and bad news about Medicare, right? So the good news is that everyone qualifies for all plans. Everyone qualifies for Medicare A and Medicare B. Everyone qualifies for Medicare C in the places where they offer it. And by the way, if I recall correctly, these plans are now being offered on Martha's Vineyard. For a long time, they were covered in either island. I do a lot of work on, many people know, on both islands, on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. If I recall correctly, they are now offered on one of those islands, but I can't remember which one, right? So you kind of check on that. And so the point is, the plans are offered everywhere. And the bad news is, you will never figure out, I mean, chances are you will never be able to figure out on your own the plan that is like the least expensive and is going to provide you the best service, right? And maybe you will, but if you do, you're going to pay a price in terms of the amount of time that you're going to need to spend trying to figure this out, right? But let me talk about that. So if you were going to do it, right, this is kind of a way that you would think about doing it. And you know, this presentation, this is one of the 12 presentations, but this is not legal advice. This is trying to help you as a senior think about this very important issue. And typically your lawyer will not know anything about this because we're not typically fighting with Medicare. There are people called Medicare advocates, often so-called geriatric care managers, who know a lot about this stuff, right? But typically lawyers don't. So, but a way to think about it. First of all, figure out your Medicare D plan, right? And remember, you're always figuring out that plan for the following year, that there's going to be an eligibility, all of these plans are annual plans. There's a period during which you get to pick your plan for the following year that starts January 1. And that period is going to be somewhere between the middle of October and the middle of December, right? But you start off by figuring out your Medicare D plan, right? Then you figure out your Medicare supplemental coverage, right? Because you know you're going to be able to get Medicare A and Medicare B. So the question is, what is the premium that you're paying for what used to be MedX and is now, you know, but now there are a number of companies that offer these Medicare, these supplemental plans. Then look at the Medicare C plans, the so-called Medicare Advantage plans that are offered in your area, and just figure out how those benefits and those premiums compare to that. And by the way, typically Medicare C plans also cover drugs, so they cover D. And look at whether that Medicare C payment, right, and the things being covered is better than the combination of your Medicare D plan, which you have to have, and you do that on your own, and the Medicare, and either the supplemental part of your Medicare A and B or your Medicare C plan, right? But really what I'm telling you, because what I just said was unbelievably confusing, right? What I'm really telling you is, get some help on this. Get some help. Now, there are several possible places you can find that help. Among the best are shine counselors. You should talk to your senior center or other senior centers, because one of the rules that most seniors don't realize is that all senior centers provide services to all seniors. That's kind of a state rule. And so if your senior center doesn't offer shine counselors, shine stands for something and I can't remember exactly what it is, but the point of shine counselors will give you advice. They're trained annually. They're all volunteers. Well, most of them are volunteers. Some in senior centers increasingly actually will have people on staff, though, who also will provide this kind of advice. So talk to the shine counselor. There are some nonprofit organizations that also provide this kind of assistance, like the Mass College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, which is located in Worcester, but will provide this service to you kind of anywhere. And then there's a limited number of private advisors that will do this. So, but specifically though, I just want to drill down on one piece of this, which is drugs. And this is where you really benefit from dealing with these folks. What you kind of need to do is, when you're figuring out this part of the plan, you need to figure out not only what are your current drugs, but kind of what are the drugs that you're going to need next year, right? And then you want to figure out, regarding those drugs, How many, what's the dosage, right? How much of it do you need? And then how many doses per day, right? What's the strength, and then, and only then, can you figure out, can you start comparing plans? Because you need to be looking at the cost, the insurance cost of the plan, but then you need to be figuring out whether that plan is going to take care of your specific needs. Now, one evidence of that is it taking care of your needs right now? But the second question you need to ask yourself is that plan that's taking care of you now, even if it's the same named plan by the same company, is it going to still have those same rules next year? Because there's no guarantee that there will, right? They have to tell you, and they have to tell you during that period, right? When you're looking at other possible plans. But the question is it going to cover you? So once you've kind of figured out all of that, then you kind of have to look in the mirror. And you say to yourself, once again, the good news is you can change plans every year. So what do you think your health is going to be next year? I remember hearing from a shine counselor, this wonderful shine counselor. She said, typically, for example, if you're really healthy, Medicare C is probably for you, because it's the least expensive. Typically, it's going to be less expensive, right, than doing other stuff. And it's going to provide these extra benefits in addition to the basic Medicare A and B, the real hospital or medical type benefits. Typically, once you're getting more sick, you want to be on Medicare A and Medicare B. But regarding the drug plan, it's all over the map. The question is, what are the drugs that you really need to be needing? So, and then you can decide how much risk you want to be taking. That's the point of insurance. Insurance, you've got a risk that is out there, and you have to decide how much you want to pay to get rid of that risk. Then there are these, kind of related questions on drugs, brand names versus generics. Can you really use simply a different kind of drug as opposed to just brand name or generic of a particular drug, right? And then you want to pick the pharmacy, because you will be amazed. I talked to a wonderful private advisor named Peter McKay, who was on Nantucket and for years had worked with the hospital first. And then retired from the hospital, and he just does this part-time. But he said, in many places, you can literally go to 2 pharmacies across the street from each other, right? In the same town. And they've got different prices for your drugs, for the drugs that you're buying, right? Because it depends on the deal or depending on what your plan is, right? Because it depends on the deal that particular insurance company had cut with that pharmacy chain, right? So, and by the way, in that case, you also want to look at a prescription advantage, which is a specific Massachusetts-based benefit that can supplement some of the cost of all of those drug plans, right? So you always want to look at your Medicare, you want to go through this drill of A and B plus supplemental plus D and take all that whole package together and compare it to your Medicare C options, right? You want to figure out the estimated cost of all of those traditional package and compare that cost to the Medicare C package, right? And then say to yourself, whatever you're doing right now, do you need to change that plan just because your health is changing, or because, especially in the case of the Medicare D, of the drug plans, because the plan itself is changing? Once you've done all that, go buy yourself dinner, right? Because you're easily saving, and I can just guarantee you, by talking to a shine counselor or even talking to a private advisor, you're going to save more talking to that advisor, right, than the cost of the advisor. And then buy yourself dinner with the extra. And finally, go get yourself some sleep, because once again, the goal of life is our age. Fame and fortune has passed you by. You just want to get a good night's sleep. If you got any more questions regarding any of this, you can always, or you just want to watch any of the other parts of this series, you can always find them at Elder Law Frank and Mary's YouTube channel, or you can always call me or email me. I'm happy to talk to you. I never charge for advice, which I love to give. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope you, if this has caused you to think about other presentations that you may want to watch. If you got any questions, please give me a call. Thank you very much.